So Chris Dixon, our next guest from Andreessen Horowitz, invests like only exclusively in weird things. So this is going to be a really fun conversation. Please welcome him to the stage along with Ryan Lawler, our moderator.
All right, yeah, it's all the weird stuff. So being the guy at Andreessen Horowitz who gets to invest in all the weird stuff, what makes you uniquely qualified for that job?
Well, that's a good question. I think, you know, what do we do? I mean, so my background, I was an entrepreneur and I was an angel investor. A lot of what we do is we just, you know, we try to identify interesting trends and then sort of great people you know, who are starting companies around those trends. And so, you know, a lot of it is just experience, having done it myself and invested a lot. You know, hopefully that will lead to good results.
So when you talk about identifying those interesting trends, you have invested in stuff like Bitcoin, VR, drones, Soylent. What's the common thread between all of those investments, or is there one? Does there have to be one?
I mean, I think if you look back on the history of the technology industry, one of the most important leading indicators is kind of what like hobbyists and developers are excited about. I wrote a blog post where I call it what the smartest people do on the weekends is what everyone else will be doing at work in 10 years or something. And if you go back and you look at, I mean, there's a reason why you know, Steve Jobs and Woz were in a garage and they were hobbyists and there was a homebrew computer club. If you think about it, there's you know, we have so many institutions, companies, government institutions, et cetera, whose goals are to do things over the next 2 to 3 years. Particularly like public companies, you know, they really think on a quarter by quarter basis, right? So where in the world are there people who are thinking about the next things that are going to happen over the next 10 years? Like academia is one of them, so we always look a lot at universities. And the second one is you know, sort of what the smartest hackers will do on the weekends, right? Because on the weekends they control their own time. They're not, you know, their boss at whatever company is not telling them what to do. They're going and they're doing what they love to do. And if you see what those people are excited about right now, they're excited about Bitcoin. They're excited about VR. They're excited about drones. They're excited about 3D printing. And that has historically been a very good indicator for kind of where the future is going. It's an indicator for two reasons. One is they're smart and they tend to gravitate towards interesting things. The other thing is those are the people that create the future, right? I mean, so like one way to look at Bitcoin, if you read some of the media around Bitcoin, they'll say, oh, it's this, you know, fictional currency, et cetera. Like that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is it's probably the largest software development organization in the world, in the sense that there are 10,000 plus very, very smart hackers building applications and things on top of it. You know, I mean, Google is, you know, 50,000 people, but most of those people are, you know, working on optimizing some, you know, advertising or something. There aren't many, you know, groups of 10,000 hackers working on new things. I like to say, you know, kind of GitHub is the new Bell Labs. Like if you go back and you look at where, you know, Unix and C and all these incredibly important computer science inventions came out of Bell Labs. You know, today the equivalents of those are Linux, Python. Those are all open source Docker, right? These are all open source projects.
So your job is basically just to like find all the geeks and hang out with them and see
a little bit,
play around with
like the analogy would be like in the old days you'd go to Bell Labs and you'd see what they're working on. Today you'd go to GitHub and see what's trending. Like that's kind of the where you look for the, you know, for the sort of the frontier of innovation.
Okay, so let's say you identify one of those trends that you think is interesting, that they think is interesting, people are geeking out on, hacking on. How do you pick companies within those different segments in extremely nascent markets?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think of it as like in venture capital, if you invest in a known trend, so you invest in big data or something, like big data is happening, like, you know, meaning the Fortune 1000 companies are want to buy products to help them analyze the large data sets they've been collecting. So you're not really like taking a risk on the trend, but you are taking a risk on which company will succeed there, right? With these kinds of sort of futuristic kind of investments, you're really sort of making a two-part bet. it's like a two-stage rocket or something, right? You're betting on the trend happening. Will Bitcoin work, for example? And then you're betting on a particular company, right? And so your question is, how do you? So first you identify the trend, and then you invest in the company, and that's there's no science to that. A lot of it is frankly you're investing in people. These things. What ends up happening is there's so many twists and turns along the life of a startup that kind of the only constant you have is people. Sometimes we get with Oculus, I think we got it right, both on the trend and on the company. Other times, maybe the trend doesn't happen, or we get the wrong company or something. So a lot of it, it's just a lot of it is it's a people business. You meet a lot of people. We try to evaluate them and make bets.
So when you're looking at something like Bitcoin, for instance, how do you normally just pick one company to back, or do you try to find multiple companies to spread it around a little bit?
That's a good question. So we, like most large venture capital firms, have a policy of not investing in competing companies. Right. That's because, when we invest in a company, we make a commitment to the entrepreneurs that we're backing you, and we're not going to back someone who competes with you. How you divide up what it means to be competitive is a complicated question. So for example, in Bitcoin, I'm on the board of Coinbase. We invested in Coinbase, which is doing they have a hosted wallet. You can basically go to Coin if you want to buy Bitcoin. I recommend you go to Coinbase. You can transfer from dollars into Bitcoin, buy it. You can also, there's an exchange you can trade. They're we think of it as kind of the infrastructure layer, and then on top of that, there will be applications built around Bitcoin. And in fact, they haven't been announced yet, but we made 2 seed investments recently in applications on top of it, which we think aren't competitive. And of course, we check with the companies and everything else. But yeah, so it's sort of this complicated question of how do you kind of divide things up. But for the most part, we make one bet per idea or something, category.
Okay. And so when you look at sort of these outlier developing categories, what are some categories that you either haven't invested in or you've decided to take a pass on?
We haven't really done, so Internet of Things, I think, would be one of the things that people talk a lot about. Mm-hmm. There haven't been, Is that just because there are no good companies there?
No,
there are good ones. I think so. There's the way I'd sort of break up that space is there's kind of specific products like Nest would be probably the most successful company, Dropcam, and so they're making sort of what they hope is a killer product, right? Like something everyone wants to have. And then what it appears that Nest is doing, for example, is once they have that, the thermostat, they then build the fire alarm, and then they are building. There's supposedly a whole bunch of other products, and so they go from an application to a platform, right? And then there's other companies who instead have taken the approach. Like I was an angel investor in SmartThings, which they were sort of taking the opposite approach, which is they were kind of trying to build out the platform first, and then hope that kind of developers would build things on top of it.
And now they run all of Samsung.
Yeah, now they're part of Samsung. So it's interesting. And the other possibility, some of these things too, like the possibility is just that it could just be the incumbents. It could just be Apple. They have their HomeKit. Android has their equivalent thing. Some of these things like Internet of Things are it's such a hard. You have to coordinate so many pieces, right? You need to get upgrade the router, and you need the light bulb to talk to the door, to talk to this, to talk to that. You need it's just such a giant ecosystem that sometimes it could be that it's just too much for startups. Sometimes these really, really hard spaces, it's just like Apple, they'll just come out with a router and they'll come out with 5 other devices, and Google obviously bought Nest, and so it could be that too. I don't know. It's not that we don't. I think there's a lot of great startups there. We just, for whatever reason, we haven't had the opportunity to, or found one that we thought was a good fit. So,
how about AI?
Yeah, AI is interesting. So I've made a few investments there.
Any that have been?
Yeah, well, I was Wit AI, which actually Facebook acquired them very quickly after we invested. The challenge with AI is a couple things. One is that the AI researchers are considered it's a relatively small supply. There's probably 10,000 people on Earth or something who are serious AI researchers, and the the demand for them from places like Google and Facebook is so incredibly high that instantly when you invest or when those companies are formed, they get very attractive acquisition offers from these, like kind of shockingly, I mean, DeepMind, I think, was publicized. That was a relatively small team bought for, I think it was, I don't know what I heard, 400 million or something. I mean, so the challenge from our perspective is just that the companies get bought so quickly, which, it's great.
Not necessarily a bad thing for.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your model. Like if you're an angel investor, that can be great. In our model, like we try to sort of get these multi-billion-dollar outcomes, and so it's a different model, because we have a big fund. But that's one thing. I have another investment that I'm very excited about. It's called Skydio. It's a vision system for drones.
Okay.
So if you think about it, if any of you have like the DJI, the drones, you fly it around. I bet half of those, if you got it for Christmas, are broken at home because they're very hard to navigate using like 2 joysticks, and then like you hit a tree or whatever. I literally have 2, and I crashed them both. And so what Skydio is doing is basically you can use regular cameras to no special equipment, and just it automatically creates it's like a video game, like a 3D mapping of the environment, and then it can navigate around, which to me seems like a clear need for drones. So that's one that we did. Those are guys. This is a great team. They're PhDs from MIT. And experts in machine vision. So.
When you talk about drones, how long is it going to be before we have a serious terrorist scare? Someone just
with drones?
Yeah, with drones. Someone strapping a grenade to a drone.
Well, that's one reason. So I have 2 drone investments. So I have Skydio and then Airware. Airware is building kind of an operating system for drones, and we believe the belief with Airware is that drones need to be done. So there's a lot of things in technology that are done kind of open source and let's just hack something together. I don't believe that should be the case for drones, partly for the reasons you're saying. There's serious security risks if somebody goes and hijacks our, if we have drones flying, which will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. You will see drones. The obvious use cases are for farming. You survey the land, and it lets you more precisely distribute water and fertilizer and things. There's a great use case is surveying. So there's something like 10,000 cell phone or 30,000 cell phone towers in the country. Those have to be surveyed every couple of weeks. It's the most dangerous job in the United States, according to OSHA. Every 3 weeks, someone is either killed or seriously injured in that job climbing up these towers. That's something which right now you're going to see very soon. Drones instead. You take the drone and you go and you survey, and so the person is still doing it, but the person's now controlling a drone instead of climbing up this tower, right? You're going to see stuff like that, and there are going to be tens of thousands of drones doing things like that in the next few years. We don't want to have. It's a serious security risk, right? So. Yeah. So with Airware, we took from the start of the view that we need to work very closely with regulators. So for example, we have government grade encryption that goes in between the drone and the controller to make sure that can't be hijacked. There's a whole bunch of the drones have basically a FAA kill switch, so anyone from the FAA can hit a button and that overrides all the other systems. So it was built. The theory there was in our investment was it was built from the start to be kind of the most compliant, safest drone, and that this won't be a space where kind of open source and the sort of the toys like the DJI stuff is widely used. I don't think we want basically Chinese hobbyist drones all around our country. So,
Soylent. Did you taste it before you invested?
I did. The first time I met Rob, he brought some Soylent. The goal, Soylent is a company that it's an amazing team. It's the dream with Soylent it's basically the food industry. If you look at the food, if you go into a typical convenience store, you literally there's not a single. I challenge you to find a single thing in a convenience store that is even remotely healthy. Even the so-called health bars are just filled with sugar. There has been no, and basically the food, if you look at typical food companies, they, all of their money is spent on marketing and on distribution. They go and they pay each other, they pay the retail stores to promote their thing, they ads on TV. They spend almost no money on actually creating good products.
So we're going to fix this with a powder
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. So I would say broadly, there's sort of a food movement going on in Silicon Valley, and there's a bunch of really exciting companies. There's like Hampton Creek and Impossible Foods and a bunch of other people doing. So people are. I think it's great that this is now an area where people are are innovating and applying science. Now, what Soylent really is, so Soylent's interesting. It started off really as an online forum. If you Google Soylent and you go there, you'll see it's a very active community. And the way I think of Soylent is really a community of people who are enthusiastic about using science to improve food and nutrition. Okay, and if you go read the forums, it basically
are these the same guys? They're trying to hack your sleep by taking like 2-hour naps.
I mean, there's a lot of crossover in those, like the quantified food, quantified self. There's a lot of crossover. So that's really what Soylent began as sort of this online movement. It was this crowdfunding thing so basically, and if you go there and you read the stories, most of these people, they're like. The stories are like, I was diagnosed with diabetes. Diabetes is an incredible epidemic in this country. And, if you're outside of San Francisco and you're not like eating, organic food and things, like you basically, like you go to like where I'm from, Springfield, Ohio, like it's like Arby's and Hardee's and Hot Pockets and like that's it. The only other way to do it is to go and like, you go and cook.
Buy a packet of flour.
A lot of people don't have time. So like this. Yeah. So the idea is just that I think with the general food movement, what's going on is to one, invert the cost structure of these companies, and instead of spending all their money on marketing, spend on products. So Soylent has never spent a single dollar on marketing, and we hope never to. The only marketing we're ever going to do is scientific studies, research studies to show that people that drink Soylent get healthier. We hope that will show. So the point is we're inverting that model and we're doing that differently. And it's one of many sort of. It's not by itself going to fix the the sort of the nutrition issues we have, but I think it's one step along the way.
So back in San Francisco Disrupt, Peter Thiel said he was short New York and long Silicon Valley.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's what he said. What do you think about that?
Well, I think New York. I think if you look at it now, there's probably so Etsy just went public and is a multi-billion-dollar company. There's companies like Shutterstock and I think On Deck Capital that went public recently. Companies I'm biased, but I'm very sure that the companies I'm involved with will be multi-billion-dollar companies, including BuzzFeed, Stack Exchange, which is Stack Overflow, Warby Parker already is valued above $1 billion. Kickstarter, what else? There's a bunch. So basically, MongoDB. There will be in the next 2 to 3 years $10 billion plus companies in New York. Which how
about one $10 billion plus?
I think it's very likely some of those will break. I don't know which one exactly, but but once you have a few at a billion, a couple billion, like it's not that much of a stretch. So I think though that's the reason I'm saying it's not just is that I think there's a certain minimum critical mass you need in a tech ecosystem, and I think we're now getting there because what happens is those companies will get bigger. They've now trained a whole new, one is a lot of those people will make money and become angel investors. And so you'll have this whole kind of new ecosystem. They have startup experience. They'll be advisors to startups. All the benefits you see in Silicon Valley, like the PayPal mafia kind of effect, right? Like you'll now, like one of the things people always.
Who would the East Coast PayPal mafia be?
I think these 10 companies I'm mentioning will be, those are the candidates. You've already seen, I already have seen a lot of interesting companies that were spun out of Etsy, for example. So it just takes time. I mean, I think of it as, Silicon Valley it's been over 50 years of sort of developing, and I think the other cities that are probably the most relevant right now are LA, New York, and Seattle. And Seattle has, of course, Microsoft and Amazon, which is a huge advantage. They also just have very great startup scene. LA had Oculus, Snapchat. A lot of good stuff going on there. So I just think these things take time, and I don't know. I think it's great that we're seeing kind of the Silicon Valley ethos exported to other places, because I think it's very positive for I think the idea that that a smart kid coming out of some computer science program or some whatever top school the fact that they now, like, due to people like, Paul Graham and Y Combinator who've evangelized this thing, the fact that now it's, and Peter Thiel too, that it's now considered a viable career path to go and start a company or join a startup in a way that it was really much more, even 10 years ago, it was a pretty niche activity. And what we would always find when we tried to recruit people, when I was running my own startups, is that the parents would say, like, what are you talking about? Like, you have an offer at Goldman Sachs or McKinsey, like, why would you ever go to this, startup with a weird name I never heard of? That is changing somewhat. Like, now it's seen as sort of a somewhat legitimate career path, which is a good thing. I think that's, I don't think we need more people working at hedge funds and Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. I think it's great that if we have more people, trying to create a better food product or doing some biomedicine thing. Or
all right, we got to run. Last question: yes or no? Are we in a bubble?
No.
All right. Thank you.